Hello, good afternoon to everybody here in the Swiss time afternoon. It's a pleasure to have you here in the next installment of our SICAM Marble Marian Mindsight series. This is a series that we organize at SICAM together with Marble, the National Competence Center on Research in the discovery of new materials. It's a pleasure to have here with us also the chair of this initiative, Nicola Marzari. And this is a series where we want to address the impact, the societal impact in a broad sense that modeling and computation has. And for that purpose, we invite people in also a format that is slightly different from the usual academic format in which we communicate among us to address aspects of computation and modeling that normally we are not so exposed to. Today's topic will be about this Programma101. That's actually the first desktop. Was produced by Olivetti. That's not the type of desktop that we have on our normally on our desk and we work with, and it will be interesting to know the history behind how did it develop, what was really the vision that Olivetti had, and how did it work. So it's a pleasure to have with us Beniamino De Ligori Carino from the Foundation Adriano Olivetti, and Pierpaolo Perotto, who works now in Finza but has also a very close connection to Olivetti that we will hear about. Before we go into the topics of today, I wanted to take a minute to advertise the events that we organize at SICAM and also at Marble until the end of the year, because on top of this series, we also, Marble organizes regularly distinguished lectures. So the next one, there are two coming before the Christmas break. One by John Perdio actually next week, and the other one in December by Professor Ingrid Merti. And also at the end of the month, we have a monthly mixed gen session that we address to young researchers, and the next one will be on machine learning and simulations. The experience lecturer will be Gabor Chani, and there are two younger ones, then a poster session, and the younger contributions haven't been decided yet. And finally, also in December, we will organize together with Marble another installment of our series of classics in molecular materials modeling, where we invite the people who have discovered or proposed algorithms that have become a classic or have a standard used in our communities to really also to learn about what these algorithms bring, how they have developed, and also to know a bit the story behind it. Also in an informal format. So, and the next one will be by Thanos Panagiotopoulos and Dominic Tildesley on fluid phase equilibrium by computer simulations. So for today, the afternoon is organized in a first part of the afternoon where we will listen two presentations. The first one's by Beniamino on coding a legacy, Adriano Olivetti and the factories of goods, and then afterwards presentation by Pierpaolo Perotto on the Programma101, a small big idea. We will do a small break. Each presentation then will have the corresponding session of questions where you can participate. And then there will be also a second part after a short break where then it will be more a conversation, an informal conversation with the two of them. And again, you will have the possibility to interact and participate. These lectures and these other events that I was referring to are regularly recorded, and then you can actually look at them. Particularly, you can look at the previous Marian Mindsight events, but also the other ones I referred to, both in the SICAM website and in the Marble website. Okay. And just before now we move to the actual, just to be able to listen to our invited speakers today, a few questions, a few organizational points, sorry. This is a hybrid event. We have the people here in our room at SICAM, which is really nice to see it alive again. But then a number of people are also attending remotely, which is also a good way to disseminate these events. So it's important that we organize ourselves during this session. So regarding recording, as I mentioned, we'll record this session. So this is being recorded, will be available to, in the CCAM YouTube channel and in the Marble website if you want to look at it again, or you can only attend partially today. As I said, your participation is very important, both on-site and remotely. For those who are here, you will be able to ask questions, and then Sara Bonella, the Deputy Director, she will be sharing and will take care of your questions. For those of you who are attending remotely, through Zoom, you can write your question in the Q&A feature, and then actually Nicola Marzari and myself will be taking care to relay questions together with Sara to the speakers. For those of you attending remotely, you cannot activate the video during the duration of the Zoom session, and also the chat feature has been deactivated so that we focus all the interactions through the Q&A to facilitate as much as possible the communication. As I said, this pretends to be an informal event, so your participation and how you engage with the questions and in the conversation, it's also an integral part of today's event. So I think that's enough from me. I now give the floor to Sara Bonella, so that she will take care of introducing the speakers and sharing the session today.
Thank you very much, Ignacio. Thank you all for being here with us in presence and remotely. So I have been thinking a little bit about how to introduce today's conversation. This is a conversation, so it's not terribly structured. And I decided to start by telling you a story and letting one of the protagonists of today's narrative to introduce the topic. So the story is as follows. On November 8, 1959, so just yesterday, a few years ago, Adriano Olivetti, one of the main characters that you will get to know much better today, stood in front of the President of the Italian Republic, the President of the Council of Ministers of Italy, various ministers, local authorities, scientists, and general public, in a room, I think, in the Politecnico di Milano. And he was there to launch and present the first electronic calculator developed by Olivetti, and that was there to be at disposal for the research community. And he made a speech, and what I would like to start from is some parts of this speech that I have tried to translate, which is going to be an interesting experience, okay? So the computer was called ELEA 9003, and in some sense, it's the bigger and older brother of the main protagonist of the little desktop computer that we're going to get to know today, the Programma101, okay? So here, this is Adriano speaking. It seems to us that the creation of the calculator ELEA may be a real contribution not only to the technological development of the country, but also to its social and human progress. With ELEA, our enterprise, it's not simply extending its traditional production to a new area of huge possibilities, but reaches a goal that embodies what I consider the inalienable highest goal that an industry must pursue. The goal, that is, to act not only to affirm its name or work, but to achieve common progress, economical, societal, ethical, for the whole community. The decision to put this first electronic computer center at full disposal of those universities that will want to use it for research is an almost natural consequence of this belief. Today's solemnity rewards the efforts of those who in our research offices and in our factories have contributed in a climate of intelligent and harmonious industriousness to the realization of this machine. A machine that is created by mankind to serve mankind, to free it with the fruit of its own labor from the ancient labor of some harder and duller trials, to give it new fields to affirm its vocation to build, to create with new tools and objectives, new, more dignified and suggestive possibilities to work. So the reason why I decided to start with this is, first of all, because I think that this speech has a rhythm that is somewhere in between Abraham Lincoln and Barack Obama that I really like. But also because, to me, it sets the stage to the reason why we thought, together with Nicola and Ignacio, and with the collaboration of Beniamino and Pierpaolo, that this might be a story of interest for us. As I said, the conversation is going to be unstructured. It's a free conversation. Hopefully, this will be also full of surprises coming from your questions and your way to interact with us. But there are 3 items that I hope that you're going to find that I wanted to point out as possible points of interest for what we're doing. The first thing is that we're going to talk about a technological development that sits at a turning point of great importance for the science that we do as simulators and modelers. We are talking about a moment of transition between mechanical calculators and electronic calculators, and the adoption and mass production of these things that were starting to come out from military laboratories, from secret research centers that belong to the Navy and the Army, and were starting to be produced by private businesses to be put at the service, as Adriano says, of society. So this is one first thing. There is a technical aspect here that I think it's interesting, because computers are our tool of the trade, and I think it's always interesting to know a bit about the history of the objects that we use every day. Then there is a second thing, which to me is very interesting as well, and it has to do with the fact that any technological or scientific development is the result of something within the scientists or the people or the engineers who create them, and something that is without them, around them. In this case, it is the culture, I would say the philosophy and the set of values that animated the Olivetti industry, and that are somewhat represented in this speech by Adriano. So this is also interesting to me, the connection between the environment, the philosophy, and the results that were intended for profit. I don't think that Adriano was a benefactor. He wanted to make money out of what he was doing, but this money had to be there to grow, for the whole society to grow together. Beniamino will correct me and tell us more about this today. And the third point, which to me is quite interesting and fascinating, is, as you will have understood, I am a bit in love with this story and with the notion of the Olivetti philosophy and style of life. The words that Adriano pronounced, what you will hear today about his way of making business, is almost too good to be true. It doesn't seem possible. And in some sense, it is a model that has not really survived up until today. We don't have an Olivetti laptop on our desktops. We don't have an Olivetti industry at the forefront of production in Italy or in Europe. But it is at the same time a model that has been incredibly successful for almost 70 years. You're talking about an industry with global outreach and impact and with huge profit margins. So what happened? Why did it work? And then why did it stop working? These are the questions that I am curious to hear and learn more about today. We're going to be guided in this tour and story by 2 speakers that I am very, very happy to have here with us. Beniamino De Liguori Carino from the Adriano Olivetti Foundation and Pierpaolo Perotto. Beniamino, who is our first speaker today, will join me in a moment while I try to charge his presentation as well. He's an historian by training, but he soon left the academic world of industry to migrate towards work in the publishing, in companies, and he's now the Secretary General of the Adriano Olivetti Foundation. He also happens to be Adriano Olivetti's grandson. So one theme of today is that we're going to try to tell big stories also through the eyes of those for whom these were family stories. Without further ado, Beniamino, you have the floor, 40 minutes plus questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. On my behalf as well, and in the first place, I would like to thank the Marvel and SECAM for having invited us, and of course, Nicola, Sara, and Ignacio, and all the staff from SECAM, CHECAM, for providing the organization of our talk today. As said, my name is Beniamino De Liguori. I chair the Adriano Olivetti Foundation in Rome. And Coding a Legacy, Adriano Olivetti and the factories of goods. There is a small mistake. I do apologize for that. I think that this title really gives and pinpoints one of the most topical and above all fascinating characteristics of the story we may refer to as Olivettism. And it also pinpoints a facet of our foundation and its activities and commitment in representing since 1962 one of the most interesting and significant entrepreneurial, social and cultural adventures of the 20th century, which is the, as Sara has said, the Olivetti adventure. And as you could see from the program of today, limited time to tackle very wide topics such as the Olivetti history and legacy. Today I will provide a so-called introduction to the Olivetti world, a brief overview placing specific focus on links which bound together the Olivetti entrepreneurship experience as a whole of historical facts and theoretical proposals, with some of the most intriguing challenges we are nowadays facing, not only in economics, but as a whole society. And I will also briefly revoke some key points with the help of few images I will show you now, and the nexus and quotes that can provide a frame around the Olivetti's legacy. A legacy, and this is the first thing I would like to underline, a legacy that contains the nexus between material progress, technical efficiency, ethical responsibility, and of course, beauty. And hopefully this frame will serve later to better understand what Paolo Brotto is going to tell you about the machine we have seen in the P101, the little machine that could, that I guess it's also be a more appealing talk for your university degree. And for the benefit of those who may not know what we are talking about, like in depth, Olivetti is one of the most important companies in the 20th century in mechanics, and from the beginning of the 50s in electronics. First Italian multinational company, very few or non-competitor worldwide for many years in its core business, which were typewriters, calculating machines, and office furniture. The only competitor, as we will see perhaps after with Paolo, would be the IBM for a decade in developing the electronic industry, like not only in Europe, but like worldwide. Olivetti was founded by Camillo Olivetti in 1908 in Ivrea, a small village between Turin and Milan, and led to international success by son Adriano Olivetti from the 30s to the 60s, when he tragically and unexpectedly died at age 59. So, and what comes later is going to be addressed by Paolo. So what is the Olivetti legacy and how we may define it? And most importantly, why it is so meaningful, at least to our opinion. Why do we see an increasingly interest in, like, towards the Olivetti legacy, and studying, deepening, or simply contribute to its revival? I would say that way. In other words, like, should we be looking at the Olivetti's legacy? Should we be looking to the achievements of Olivetti in his field as an antique dealer marvels at beautiful piece merrily as a dusty symbol of the past? Or instead, shall we be looking at Olivetti as well as an intangible but yet very concrete chance for a change, as a real deal breaker in terms of setting the ends for our social and economic models? The big and still, at least in my opinion, an unanswered question that Adriano Olivetti asked himself more than 50 years ago is not far from the question that our time seems so often to ask to all of us. In Olivetti's own words, how can we be technically and materially advanced without being internally and ethically spoiled? And to start our journey into the Olivetti's legacy, there are two words that are key in order to answer to this question, and above all to get acquaintance with Olivetti. The first word is responsibility. can industry set aims for itself? Are these simply in the indexes of profit? Beyond its obvious rhythms, isn't there something more fascinating, a destination, a vocation, even in the life of factories? We do believe in spiritual values, love, truth, justice, and beauty. Whoever forgets even one of these values cannot lead anyone on the path of civilization. And this was Adriano Olivetti in 1955. These words were spoken by Adriano Olivetti during the inauguration of the new Olivetti plant in Pozzuoli near Naples in 1955. And it could be helpful to add that that factory, the factory in Pozzuoli, opened by Olivetti in 1955, was probably one of the most advanced industrial plants in Europe at the time, and possibly beyond. And by opening that plant, Olivetti also set at the time a best practice for the years to come, at least according to the Italian history, which is the attempt to bring wealth and work to southern Italy instead of dragging northwards the workforce from the south of Italy. But this is another like topic. So the first word is responsibility, and the second word is community. And this was drawn by Adriano Olivetti, and it symbolized the idea of a territorial community for the area surrounding the city of Turin. It was made by Adriano Olivetti on the reverse of a book, and we keep these drawings in our headquarters in Rome. And in 1958, Olivetti, like the political movement Olivetti founded back in 1947, was to run for the general political election that took place in Italy in 1958, as I was saying. But 1958 it's an important date also for another reason, because 1958 is the same year when Olivetti, as a company, acquired its American competitor, the Underwood factory, the Underwood company. In other words, during the highest phase of industrial expansion for Olivetti, there was an understanding of the necessity to remain deeply connected and rooted to the original surroundings with one's own community, maintaining, according to Olivetti, like also a global, what we nowadays we call global scale. And in order to start like also knowing these protagonists, these characters, linked to this notion of global, of roots, there is a photograph portraying the Olivetti family at the beginning of the 20s, and Camillo Olivetti, the founder, is the man with that like prophetic white hair, and his fan. Adriano Olivetti is the young man on the left end of the picture, and the Camillo Olivetti designed and built this red brick factory at the beginning of the 20th century, in between 905 906, and also he bought like in the surroundings of this red brick factory, he bought like a former convent where like the Olivettis lived for the years to come, and it's very fascinating because inside this former convent there are like these amazing frescoes, which are the most important frescoes that are to be found in Piemonte, the region where Ivrea is, from the 15th century, and they represent the final judgment and these like everlasting, eternal like struggle between the forces of good and the forces of like evil, and the production facilities and social services buildings sprung up around this former convent year after. And this is to me is a wonderful metaphor for the cross-pollination between spirituality and technology that has provided us with a landscape kept intact in Ivrea, at least until recently, as well as with the extraordinary product of human activity in harmony with nature. And like recently I stumbled into this image, which belongs to totally a different world. This is like a section of these huge frescoes made by Mexican artist Diego Rivera in the fourth River Rouge facility in Detroit, and that was commissioned by Henry Ford's son to Diego Rivera in 1932. And it's weird and it's very intriguing that 1932 is also the year when Adriano Olivetti was appointed as CEO in Olivetti. And I'm still working on this nexus, but it's very fascinating because as for the San Bernardino fresco, this one, even here by Diego Rivera, more than 4 centuries after, there is this struggle between the man and the machine, the man and the forces of modernity and some ancestral also figures and images that for Diego Rivera were to be found in the Mexican pantheistic culture. However, going to 1932, as said, 1932 is when Camillo Olivetti, the founder, appointed his son Adriano as a CEO, and 5 years afterwards as a president of the Olivetti. And he leaves the factory in the hands of his son Adriano with only one imperative. Adriano, you can use whichever means you see fit in the introduction of the new methods, but never fire anyone, as involuntary unemployment is the worst disgrace that can befall a human being. Of course, this is these and all the other quotes that I'm gonna show you, as Sarah said, are translated by me. So I do apologize if there are any parts and meanings which are missing. And so I think here lies the point, and in Camillo Olivetti's words, and it leads us to the next photograph portraying Adriano Olivetti in the mid-50s, and so we see 2 men speaking as men and not as owner and worker, although they are committed, of course, in different roles, very different roles. And this photo was shot in Via Jervis, along the factory production line. Via Jervis is the main road that really crosses Ivrea, and we're going to see it now from above. And if we look at Via Jervis at a bird's eye from above, we can note that the factory production lines grew proportionally alongside the building dedicated to the social services designated for factory workers. In other words, as the factory grew on one side of the street, as did social services and activities on the other side. You can see those are all the production lines built by Olivetti throughout the 30s and the 50s. And these on that side of the picture are all the social services, so healthcare, kindergartens, libraries, and so on. And we can also see here, in front of this beautiful building made by architect Ignazio Gardella, which was the cafeteria, this is the convent. So, as I said, we can see from this image how really this kind of spiritual building, it's really geographically and symbolically at the in the very center of this environment, this industrial environment. And the only film interview we have with Adriano Olivetti took place in one of these buildings, few weeks before Adriano Olivetti suddenly, as I said, died on February 1960. He died actually like not far from here, at like near Eagle train station, but he was coming to Lausanne. And it's a very interesting interview. You can see it on YouTube, made by the Italian philosopher and broadcaster at the time. I can't remember his name right now. Actually, I have like a void of memory. Emilio Garrone, and it's well known that Adriano Olivetti loved to stroll around the factory on Saturdays and Sundays when it was a standstill, as Olivetti was the first Italian company to give employees the Saturday off. And so the interviewer asked Olivetti in that occasion if it was true what was said in town, that he visited the factory floor on Saturday and Sundays. And Adriano Olivetti replied, yes, that was true, because when the factory is shut and the machines are silent, the issue of the relationship between modern times and human beings emerges in all its urgency. So, and right after having this conversation, the interviewer and Adriano Olivetti, they went out onto Via Gervis, the main road, and there the interviewer asked Adriano Olivetti what is architecture according to himself. At the time, Adriano Olivetti was the president of the Italian National Institute of Urbanistic and Urban Planning. And Adriano Olivetti replied, architecture is the way a society expresses itself. Architecture is what defines a society. So, let us quickly consider this society or part of it as Olivetti imagined during the 50s. So we have, of course, like products, typewriters. I just like picked up the three most iconic products by Olivetti at the time, which are the Lettera 22 and the Valentine and the calculating machine, Divisumma. The three, like all of these three products, are in the permanent collection of the Museum of Modern Art in New York. So we have machine, we have like corporate image, like advertising, generally like led by the most important and young at the time designers and creatives in Italy. And you can see how also the corporate identity try constantly to revoke this idea, that this complex of ideas that Olivetti was made of. And so we have product image, as said, showrooms. This is the Olivetti showroom in New York on the 5th Avenue, built at the beginning of the 50s, with this extraordinary murale by a Sardinian artist, Costantino Nivola. This is another image from the Olivetti showroom on 5th Avenue in New York. And this is kind of like a very well-known story, but they decided to lose some space inside the showroom in order to have this column outside, where it was really a deal breaker operation in terms of marketing. And they put, as we can see, a Lettera 22, the portable typewriter, on the top of this column, and so people could stop and actually try the machine in the street. And this was really innovative. And this is the Olivetti showroom in Düsseldorf by Gaolente, San Francisco, again, San Francisco, and this is the masterpiece. It's the, if you ever happen to go to Venice, like please go and visit. This is the only like Olivetti showroom which is still intact, where you can actually like visit. Is in Venezia, in Piazza San Marco, and it was designed by Carlo Scarpa, and still like you can access it. It's now run by the FAI, the Foundation for the Environment, the Italian Foundation for Environment. So we have products, corporate image, showroom, and factories, of course, which are now like almost empty, but I will talk about this later on my talk. So production facilities, and afterwards, as said, we have all the social services. We'll start now. This is the Centro Studio di Esperienza, where actually the P101 came out from, basically, Pier Giorgio Berotto work inside this building. And those are all images from Ivrea, of course, as said. This is the garden, the external part of the Olivetti factory in Pozzuoli. Remember at the beginning I read you like this short quote from the inaugurational speech made by Adriano Olivetti here in 1955. Social services, as said, this is the internal garden of the cafeteria. This is the external part in a vintage photo. Kindergartens, as said, housing for employees, housing for directors. This was so like an housing, like this is the first skyscraper, like I'm not an architect, but the first example of a skyscraper that like is built on, I say, horizontally and not like vertically. And it's quite an amazing building in Ivrea. And these, like, it's an image, it's a short, like, image from Henri Cartier-Bresson documenting the library inside the factory in Ivrea. And we have also a lot of publishing activities. And this is an image from the kindergarten. And I decided to end with this photo of the kindergarten because, in my opinion, it shows the key points of the Olivetti ecosystem. On one hand, we have education, culture, the need to teach beauty and justice, if I may. And on the other, exemplified by the tree in the center. Maybe it's a bit rhetoric as an image, but embodies by the tree in the center, we have the relationship between tradition and innovation, and the drive to design centered around the roots of humanity, which of course lies in nature. So now, what is the point of talking about Olivetti today? About like, what's the point of like showing these images? What is the point of also, I would say, being here today? What is, how can we use the tools of modernity as an opportunity for freedom and not as a new instrument of power? Going back to my initial question, how can we, and like the question that Adriano Olivetti made to his audience back in, I guess was 1952, how can we be advanced technically without evolving internally? And so, this machine is the Eleanor 9003. Sarah like really well introduced us to this machine. And the design was by Ettore Sozzas, and it's dated 1959. And first electronic calculator, I don't want to go like into fields that I don't manage like that well, but I guess it's the first electronic calculator run by Modern Components, launched by, as said, Olivetti in 1959. And it occupied an entire room. There are a couple of Eleanor 9003 still like reconstructed at the University of Pisa, but as we can see, like it occupied really an entire room, and it is evident to us that it no longer has a place in our contemporary world, of course. However, the words with which Adriano Olivetti explained the reasoning behind technological research in Olivetti on the day of its launch in Milan are somehow timeless, and Sarah perhaps has translated them better than I did, but these are the words. This machine was crafted by man to serve men, to free him from the ancestral toil of labor. We must commit, Adriano Olivetti ends, to a vaster moral and material front. And 6 years later, as Pierpaolo is going to tell us, the same idea of technology produced the P101, considered to be the first personal computer, desktop computer in the world. So I just, like, together with the image, I put close to it the press release that were issued in the United States the day after Olivetti presented the P101. So desktop size computer is being sold by Olivetti. Olivetti present computers in typewriter size. Olivetti reduces computers say, as Pier Giorgio Perotto, his inventor, once stated in a book we have published again like 6 years ago. This machine did not require an expert in white light code to make it function, but as a matter of fact, the Olivetti P101 was used by NASA for the 1969 moon landing. Again, maybe it's a more rhetoric to like put it that way, but tangibly demonstrating that looking at people's inner needs in projecting is what allows humanity to reach beyond its limit. And like another word used a lot by Adriano Olivetti, it's like progettare a misura d'uomo, which can be translated as projecting on a human being size and scale. And so I hope that these few images have shown what, according to Olivetti, really means to be avant-garde. And in my opinion, alongside all the avant-garde examples that we could use, and we have seen like a few of them, so products, architecture, commercial policies, cultural policies, the one which is most hidden at first glance, yet instead most truly represents the Olivetti legacy, is the 9-month maternity leave with full pay that Adriano Olivetti guaranteed to all female workers starting from 1945, right after Second World War. And Adriano Olivetti explained like this effort from the company, by the company, to guarantee like a full maternity leave with these words. We express our solidarity so that no worker who is also a mother may look with envy and pain at those mothers who have the luck and the right to enjoy the first months of their baby's life at home. So this is again Adriano Olivetti, 1945, and another like a close person to Adriano Olivetti put it once in this way, which I found it really inspiring. So he said, like, according to Adriano Olivetti, the factory was not only a producer of goods, the factory was a producer of goods. And in this precise identity between thought and action, between goods and good, that we can trace ground to answer what is like the Olivetti legacy. And this identity is also the reason for UNESCO recognizing in 2018 Ivrea as a World Heritage Site, a unique and unprecedented move. And that project was led by the Adriano Olivetti Foundation starting from 2008, when the celebration for the first 100 years of Olivetti as a company started, and it concluded in July 2018 when Olivetti became the first site of World Heritage in Italy for the architecture of the 20th century. So to us, going back to the title of this presentation, The Olivetti legacy is a cult of independence. It is the imagination of the future as a free space where to experiment, where all the most modern tools are to create a world that is materially more fascinating, but also like spiritually more elevating. Again, in the words of Adriano Olivetti, a place where beauty, and this is Adriano Olivetti, where beauty and tolerance are names and not vacant words. And in short, Olivetti means first and foremost a self-acknowledgement community of human beings in addition to an industrial and cultural history worth studying and rediscovering. And I think that ultimately are commonplace ambitions that give life to authentic values and everlasting account of history that merits to be told. And in this regard, I picked an inspiring quote by the Russian poet Josip Brodsky, who once wrote that beauty cannot be programmed, as beauty is always the unpredictable result of very normal intention. I would like to go towards the conclusion of my talk with this image of Adriano Olivetti. And there are a few things that have always struck me about this picture. In the first place, there are old men. And these give us the extent of that this history, this Olivetti history has to be placed in a certain and in a certain place of history, no? They're old men. But above all, what always really struck me, that Adriano Olivetti is basically here almost perhaps the only face we can really, recognize in this picture, apart from this guy with a hat, looking at us. And this is metaphorically, this picture, it's really inspiring, because over the last half century, many facets of Adriano Olivetti's memory, as a theorist, as a politician, as an entrepreneur, first and foremost, have been subjected to a tremendous, enormous, and truly unbelievable process of collective suppressions. And more than anything else, the suppression of his entrepreneurial exploit reveals the depth of this phenomenon. In fact, Olivetti was primarily a great entrepreneur, probably one of the greatest of the 20th century, and not just for Italy. And of course, this is not the place to analyze the causes and the context of this phenomenon. But I think we can say that Olivetti is finally and belatedly taking his place into Italian popular culture, indeed, intended here in the highest sense of the term. And this is partially due to the substantial hard work of the institution that I represent, and partially because the Olivetti's story is some ways, at least for Italy, an example of what Italy could have been and did not. In a way, it is there is a time that may return, a time that is waiting for the right moment to reveal its best side, a time that is waiting for another time to fully come to fruition. And indeed, the French poet Paul Valéry said better than me, he wrote that it takes two geniuses to create an idea, one to conceive it and the other one to recognize it. And therefore, and to conclude, the values Olivetti embodies are timeless. And this is the reason why there is a multitude of people of all ages that today see in Olivetti, especially in Adriano Olivetti, an example for an authentic progress and a true civilization. A multitude of community that are capable to find in Olivetti an answer to timeless questions for mankind, such as how to give eventually birth to a more fair and decent society where to grow up our children. And this is the reason why, at the end, we can say that somehow the Olivetti legacy is not a formula or a matter that involves a practical answer, because the Olivetti legacy is above all ourselves. And to us, for the Adriano Olivetti Foundation at least, such legacy truly comes to life in these words that were used by Adriano Olivetti to describe the bell, which was the logo he decided to have for his publishing house, for his political movement, and a logo that since 1962 represents also our foundation. No one, it's a bell, as I said. No one should hesitate to ring our bell. It rings for a free world, more palpably fascinating and more spiritually elevating. It rings for the best part of ourselves, and it echoes every time justice is up against violence, the weak are up against the mighty, intelligence is up against power, bravery is up against defeat, poverty is up against egotism, knowledge is up against improvisation, truth is up against error, and love is up against indifference. And that was Adriano Olivetti back in 1952. So this was like an introduction to a wider topic connected with the technical and technological aspects also of this story of the Olivetti legacy and history onward after Adriano Olivetti died in 1960. I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eleanor, for this fast but super interesting description of the history of the Olivetti as an enterprise. Don't go away. We have questions for you.
Sorry.
So are there questions in the room? So,
I was wondering, the foundation today, what are some of the main goals that you have as a foundation now?
Well, we have several programs divided basically in two fields of action. The first one is to promote studying and promote the studying of all the Olivetti history through the archives, the library, scholarships, and so we also are trying since I would say 30 years since when the Olivetti as a company disappeared to gather also the archives. And the other one is main field of action is to study the urban changes, especially in the former industrial sites, former industrial, what they are called factory towns. So we work with those two fields of action mainly.
Thank you.
John.
So early on, you showed a picture of an Olivetti calculator in the Museum of Modern Art. And then there's the Programma101. So for Olivetti, what was the difference between the calculator and the computer?
Well, this is a kind of it's a really specific and technical question I'm not able to answer to, but I guess that is...
Pierpaolo will tell us more, but Divisuma was a mechanical device. And the calculator was the first, Elea 9003 was the first electronic machine that they built on a large scale. I mean, there had been prototypes earlier than that, but yeah. Do we have more questions? Anything from the chat?
Yeah.
No? Okay. Yes, Javier.
You have mentioned about a political movement.
Excuse me, I didn't hear you.
You mentioned Olivetti as a founder of a political movement.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can expand that.
Yeah, sure. He found this political movement that was called, its name, Movimento Comunità, back in 1947. And Adriano Olivetti, managed to keep the movement on a local scale, for 10 years basically, and then he decided to run for the general political election in 1958, and he was actually elected, he got a seat in the Italian parliament, Adriano Olivetti himself, but then he resigned after a couple of months because it was too far away from his practical way of working on the matters that really interested him. And the political movement was mainly committed with developing he had a really complicated manifesto written by Adriano Olivetti himself, in which he imagined Italy as a whole, as a federal country of small communities, like that comes from Movimento Comunità. But he worked very hard in order to build this network of community centers all around Italy for more than 10 years. So he opened up libraries and community centers where were cultural and where cultural events took place. But we're talking about these community centers were mainly in the rural parts of Italy, so not within the cities, especially in the south.
Just to provide a little bit of context, here we are in Italy after the Second World War. Italy is one of the battlefields of the Cold War, and there is the big political opposition between the Christian Democrat Party and the Communist Party, that between the two of them have essentially the whole majority of votes, right?
Yeah.
And here comes this industrialist who decides to try this grassroots movement, which is very successful in Ivrea and locally. Olivetti was mayor of the city for many years, I think. And then when he tries to go up at the national level, things are quite hard. There is also a story with an CIA agent, I think, that comes with that, right? Because Olivetti was under surveillance by the CIA. And
because the political movement, the Olivetti's political movement truly represented a third way, which was in between the two blocks. And 10 years ago, some documents were declassified in Washington, and by these documents, we know that there was an agent, a CIA agent, who throughout the 50s, from 1952, if I remember well, until the general election in 1958, this agent kept informing the American administration about what Olivetti was doing, both on an industrial level and on a political level. And of course, this cross, Adriano Olivetti himself represent a matter of interest for the American administration, because on one hand, he was developing a really interesting political proposal, which was not he himself called it not capitalism, not socialism, was another thing. And so on one hand, he was developing this political movement, but on the other hand, he was at the head, he was running the most successful company that, as I've shown you, in 1958, went to America and bought the most important American company in typewriting. And moreover, in addition to that, in those 2 years, Olivetti was also placing himself at the
forefront.
Yeah, at the forefront of the electronic sector, which at the time, of course, also had a huge, huge importance within the military industry. So, the combination of these three aspects perhaps made the CIA decided to have Adriano Olivetti observed for many years in Ivrea. But it's a beautiful document, because I was telling Sarah a few days ago, we were chatting about this, because at the end of this document, at the end of this relation, the agent writes that, according to his point of view, at the general election of 1958, the American administration should have better back up the Olivetti's movement rather than the
Christian Democrats.
Christian Democrats movement that eventually like won that election. And in his words, like the agent said, because an aftermath of the Olivetti's movement in Italy would represent truly the most true and the most coherent result of the Marshall Plan in Europe.
So I think we have a question from the chat.
Yeah, there is a question from the online participants. It's Giovanni Cicotti, who asks, could you tell us anything about the realism, and by realism he refers to sustainability, of the Olivetti industrial plan?
Yeah, I'm not an economic historian, so I think this question has a layer was it sustainable as a project? I think yes, it was sustainable, and there are figures, especially there is a researcher who is studying now we're studying the economics of Olivetti at the years, and we're studying the economics for the Olivetti Underwood Company, which was the Olivetti Corporation of North America, and I think was absolutely sustainable. And what I've shown, which was of course a brief account of what Olivetti really did mean as a company, I think was totally sustainable, and it demonstrated that it was sustainable because ultimately this history, the story of Olivetti ended just with something which is not accountable, which is Adriano Olivetti's on that. So yeah, I think that's sustainable.
Oh, we have another question down there.
Or at least maybe even though we may take into consideration that was not sustainable at the time, in a different world Olivetti was living in, it is definitely sustainable today, or it should be definitely sustainable.
Just
I think you half answered my question, so I was about to ask, why don't we have Olivetti laptop computers on every table today?
So I think that in part this question will also be addressed in the next talk, just as a final pointer, and then we move to the next talk. But I mean, Olivetti had enough money in the early 50s to invest in an extremely expensive new development adventure, which was electronics. This is non-trivial. They had enough money to acquire companies in the United States. And they had sort of a global merchandising policy that made it so that products were sold literally across the globe. You saw where the exhibition rooms were, right? They were everywhere. So I would say that, yes, I mean, up until a certain moment in history, which coincided with Adriano's death and maybe other things in Italian history, it was a successful business. This is the amazing thing. This was not just someone who was a dreamer. It's someone who had a huge number of employees and was making profits from the machines that they were building.
No, I also think it's a really, I mean, no me to offend personal ways
Don't worry, you cannot be offended.
But I think it's a conservative way. It's a conservative way of looking at this legacy.
Maybe we can talk about this more in the conversation afterwards. I think now it's time to move to the
Just
second.
to round up, because I think it goes in the same direction. I mean, Giovanni Cicotti then builds out saying how much this sustainability was related to creativity, like for example for electronics, which I think we will also
It's something that I think
more
we're
in
going to
detail.
see more. Okay, so thank you
Thank
again,
you.
Bernardino,
Thank you.
for this very, very interesting talk. And really So now it's time to move to the second and I would say perhaps more technical part of this afternoon together. So it's my pleasure to invite here Pierpaolo Perotto. Pierpaolo is an electronic engineer by training. He graduated in the University of Genoa. And then, I mean, it's funny because as we were looking at those images that Beniamino was showing, he said, oh, that's where I went to kindergarten, that's where I went to the doctor, because he grew in the world of Olivetti. And he was also an employee of Olivetti in the research center on artificial intelligence that Olivetti opened in the early 1980s in Silicon Valley, where he sort of built his professional expertise. And then in the early 2000s, big jump here, but he became CEO of the FINSA, which is a firm on consultancy and technological development, who was created by his father, Pier Giorgio Perotto, who is another one of the very important people that we are meeting today, because he is the inventor of the Programma 101. So again, you know, a nice mixture of personal and larger scale story. Pier Giorgio, the floor is yours. 40 minutes plus questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. First of all, I have to thank you, the second Marble, to have invited me to this meeting and to share and to talk together about these histories. I am a little, I have some emotional. When I listen the speech of Beniamino, it really touched my heart because my relationship with Olivetti is very strong and is divided in three parts of my life. I had a relationship as a son of an employee of Olivetti, my early. So the one that when I was young was going to the left part of Via Ierdis when I get some code, because there is the physician that are paid by Olivetti to support all the employees. The second part of my career, as explained by Sarah, was when I get graduated and I joined as an employee the Olivetti. I worked in Olivetti for 12 years. The third part of my relation with Olivetti happened after the death of my father in the 2002. And that was a part on which I tried to rebuild the experience of my father, what happened, and connecting with also my personal experience. Today I'm going to talk about the Programma 101. And that was a machine that happened in a particular moment of the history of it happened in the 1963 and the 64, a critical moment for Olivetti. As mentioned, Adriano Olivetti passed away in the 60s, and in the 1961, also Mario Ciu, that was the person appointed by Adriano to lead the electronic division since 1955, died. And died exactly 60 years ago, the 9th of November. Today is actually, we remember that, and Mario Ciu died, unfortunately, in a car accident between Ivrea and Milan. In that period, also the Italian miracle, the economic miracle, was at the end. Some of the crisis was a period of crisis for many companies, including in the 64, the May 64, new stakeholder entering Olivetti. The families have to sell some of their stakes to support this moment of crisis. There was more or less, and they changed the leadership of the company. Bruno Visentini became the chairman, and Aurelio Peccei the new CEO. And the Peccei decided the new strategy of the company to quit from the crisis. And he said that Olivetti will find in the mechanic the keys of the future success. In other words, said back to basic, return from this come from the mechanic and try to live, to sell the electronic. And this is going to happen in August the same year. They have been creating a company by General Electric, was called Olivetti General Electric, but anyway, the majority was General Electric. And all the electronic division, the research and the development, and all the plants were moved away from Olivetti into the new company. Everything. But my father and a few collaborators that remain in Olivetti. It remained in Olivetti for one reason, because my father don't believe that would be a future, believe in Olivetti, and didn't believe that the new company will really want to invest in the development of the electronic. So he preferred to stay there, also because they have an idea in mind. This idea was called Perottina, because at that time Programma101 was not already set. So they called Perottina because it was an idea to create a small calculator, a small computer. Here we see the teams, the people that worked together. This is my father. This is Giovanni De Sandre, the right hand of my father. Gastone Garziera, which supported my father very strongly in all the phases, and Giancarlo Toppi. Giancarlo Toppi didn't follow the development of the project until the end because he had to take to go to the university, and my father supported him to go to the university. So at a certain point, I left the team. There was a very crucial moment because everything has moved away. The dream of the electronic go away from Olivetti. But here there is a small hope that being inside, and the small hope was represented by the idea that he has in mind. My father, that after was expressed in this word, he was saying, "I was dreaming a friendly machine, to which delegate those operations that create mental stress and mistakes. A machine that is able to learn and then gently execute, that store data in simple and intuitive instructions, that everybody can manage, that is not expensive, and with the same dimension of other products for the office that people are already get used. I had to create a new language that doesn't require an interpreter with the white coat." These are the way on which they represent in his book after what is the idea that he has in mind, that in that period was something that was not even able to think, considering what are the technology, the start of the technology at that point. So the idea was to create something small, something easy to use, something affordable, not expensive, and anyway that was something. To achieve these goals, at that time there was a huge problem with the technology. None of the component that is all available 10 years later was available at that time. We don't have the semiconductor, we don't have the virtual circuit, the integrated circuit, the memory. We don't have microprocessor. We don't have a floppy disk. We do have printer, but we will see. So it was even difficult to imagine the possibility to create a small machine. But even in front of these difficulties, they start in trying. This is important to have the objective very clear to take a certain technical decision. The first one was about the memory. The memory at the time available was the magnetic core that has been used in the Eleanor 9003. That was a kind of a memory which is not small, and which is not expensive, which is very expensive. So that was the ultimate technology for implementing a random access memory. But that doesn't fit in the dream, in the idea. So they got to retrieve a technology, an idea that has been arising in the 40s. That was not the ultimate, it was the manuscriptive delay memory. How it works. You have an iron rope on which you have a transducer that transforms an electronic pulse into a mechanical pulse that propagates on the rope, taking some time. And when they arrive at the end, there is another transducer when they receive the mechanical pulse transform in an electronic pulse. And then there is a circuit that takes this pulse back to the end. So the memory is made of a train of mechanical pulse that can go all over this rope. It was able to take around 2,000 bits, which means 240 bytes, 240 bytes, that represent the memory, the RAM memory of the decided to be the RAM memory of the Perottina and then the Programma101. It is the solution which is not expensive, small, and that can do this job. Another problem was the arithmetical logic unit, or what we call today the microprocessor. At that time, there was only available the transistor. And they decided to create what they call micromodules, that was being patented, by the way, so that each of these modules are able to implement a NOR port, a NOT OR, which is the NOT OR is the operator that allows to implement any kind of logic. So, and that can be built in a vertical way so that you can, so that you can put the two boards, one in a vertical way, so one very close to the other, because in this way they have a better usage of the space. And they were able to implement 900 micromodules. And with these micromodules, they do not only drive and pilot the logic of the machine, but also able to implement the basic operation, including the square root. The square root was a piece, something peculiar of the Olivetti 101 because it was not able to be implemented by a mechanic calculator. The other things was how to make the data storage. And this was something that was invented by the Olivetti Programma101, was the magnetic card. The Eleanor 9000, they have the tape unit, that's a huge machine. They decided to have this card. On one side is as a magnetic, on the other side is made of wood. It's made of paper so that you can make some notes. So you insert the magnetic card on top and he exits here and stay in this position, so that in this part you can put some notes that indicate what are the meaning of these programmable keys according to the type of program that you have. That was a very brilliant and smart idea, because that allows you to store when you all your data, all your instruction on your program before switching off the machine, so that the day after you switch it on, insert the card and restart, and then you have the program ready. The other thing is try, anyway, to implement a programming language that has to be very easy. And this language include 5 mathematical operations, 3 transfer data from one register to other, 2 instructions for printing, and some instruction to do the conditional jumps and also not conditional jumps, so that they allow us to implement any logics of the programming logic. And this, you can see here an example. These are all the keys that you can push on the Olivetti 101 to set up a program, a very simple program. The instruction for teaching to a person how to program the Programma 101 was very small, it was less than 40 pages, and it's something much less complicated than the programming language of a big mainframe that is done with using machine code. The last things that they have to face was the issue of the printer, so the output. So whatever you do in a program, at the end you have to produce an output. And the output is the printer. The printer itself was not an issue at the time. The point is that at that moment, Olivetti has sold all the electronic division to General Electric, so any capabilities regarding the electronics, so to be more precise, regarding the possibility to pilot, to control a printer through an electronic was not anymore inside Olivetti, because that has been moved to General Electric. And to create from scratch a new printer is something that takes time. Takes more or less before testing and doing a thing, something like 1 year. And that could be a very big problem, because that one of the objectives of the team is to be fast to creating this machine. But this was a bit, for these things happened something, they were lucky. The culture within Olivetti, created by Adriano, is giving to the people the freedom to experiment their ideas, create a situation where a designer, an engineer specialized in the printer, out of their specific commitments, just because he wanted to test, build a printer controlled by the electronic. Even nobody has asked to him to do it. And then happened some years ago, and this guy didn't move to the Olivetti General Electric. So when my father in particular, Giovanni De Sandre, went to talk to this guy, he was really surprised, because he was an expert on printer. He asked, we need the printers with certain characteristics, speed, and must be controlled by the electronic. How much times you take to create this print? And he said, taking out from the bag, it's here, that's ready. Because without any commitment, just because he was foreseeing, he was looking forward, he did it during his professional experience within Olivetti. So all these things then has been to put together. And they put together in this is the first prototype where the magnetic card, where the magnetostrictive line, where the micromodules, where the printer was assembled together. And then this machine, so far called Peruttina, was presented to Natale Cappellaro. Natale Cappellaro was the inventor, the designer of the DD-Zoom 24, an electronic, a mechanical calculator that was one of the products that make rich Olivetti in the 50s. because these calculators has been built using the metal sheet. All the gears of the Pascal machine, which is the basis of this calculator, has been set using metal sheet. But the metal sheet, in theory, doesn't have the technical and the mechanical characteristic to support this mechanical stress of this very fast rotation. But he was so genius that he was able to design all these gears, all these equipment in a way that they were possible to work. And what is the reason which is important to use a metal sheet? Because with a metal sheet you put under a press, and with just one press you will create all the gears in one shot, instead of creating to fuse the metal and let's consider that the number of gears within a machine like that are a lot. So that he was creating a machine working perfectly with an incredible margin, unbelievable margin. The margin on that machine was 90%. The relationship between the price, the selling price and the industrial cost was 90%. Was 90% the margin. This was the genius. Capellaro became the general director of all the ufficio progetti, so all the research and development in the mechanic, that became at that time the core of the strategy of the Olivetti, and see the demo of the Olivetti 101. Before the demo, they presented a couple of programs. One program that is calculating the orbit of a satellite, and another one I think that do some financial stuff. And it stays, before saying something, it takes a couple of minutes, and at the end Natale Capellaro said this famous quote near Perotto, seeing what this machine is able to do, I realized the era of the mechanic is ended. And this, said by a genius of the mechanic, is a quote of plenty of meaning, in particular in a situation where the new top management of the Olivetti has decided to focus all the effort on the mechanic. Between November 1964 and October 65, this is the machine has changed from a prototype to a real product with the beautiful design created by Mario Bellini, a young designer that, by the way, has even if he was young, at the time he won already 2 gold compass for the design. And the machine was decided to take to the international, to the fair in New York, the New York World's Fair, that was called BEMA Show, by the way, where the new Olivetti decided to participate with his new strategy, with the new era. And this is the functions that are within, and to go, he decided to go there with the Olivetti 101, which has put together all these functions. You see here the magnetic card reader, here the printer, the function key, the numeric key, the arithmetic keys, the program, but also this light, the blue and red, that was on the go, was stating the status of the machine. If everything is working fine, it was blinking the blue light. But if you make a mistake or you put a wrong data inside the program, it will blink in the red. This machine has been also decided to present to this fair, but was not presented because that was the main machine, the main message. They went to the fair, but the focus of Olivetti was on the Logos 27, which was a mechanical collector representing the new strategy, and the Programma 101 just presented in the back room of the fair, in the side room, small, just to show what can Olivetti done in the electronic. He had just been sold electronic, but he can work on the electronic more to do some calculators. It was presented there to support the launch of the Logos 27. But something goes in a different way. During the fair, nobody cares about the Logos 27. And there was a long line to visit the Programma 101. So that they have to put the Programma 101 away from that small room in the front end, and they have to put in that sphere, you see here, that there is the Programma 101 inside a glass sphere, because they wanted to demonstrate that that machine was not connected to any mainframe. Because what has been done, the demonstration, has done two big demonstrations. One demonstration was that they inserted the calculation of the position of a satellite that going around the Earth in orbit. And this was very effective because that was the period on which there was the battle of the space between the US and the Russians. In that moment, the American was losing the battle. And because when you put just a few instructions, then the printer started printing all the data, so it was creating a lot of things automatically without any contributions. Another thing that makes a lot of create the suggestion was that there had been developed a kind of video game. A game that so that you can play with the machine. It's difficult to find the possibility to play with a mechanical calculator, but this kind. And this was called Angela Games. At least the list was very simple. You set a goal, a number, which is a goal, higher than, if I remember, 30, you can set 31. You can decide if this is the computer or is the computer or is the person that starts, and you can start deciding a number between 1 to 6 that you have to enter in the Programma 101. Let's say 6. The computer has to respond, choosing another number between 1 and 6, excluding, 6 and 1, which is the two numbers that are opposite in dado.
In a dice.
Dice. Into a dice. So the computer can answer only with the other 4 numbers. That is the only constraint. But you have to choose one of these 4 numbers. So then you choose a number, then the controller returns to you, and then you have to, with the same constraint, choose the other 4 numbers, but not the one in the opposite that has been chosen by the computer. Who won? Who won? Who was able to arrive and at his turn reaching exactly the target. And it was funny because even if my father, that was the inventor, the designer of the machine, joking, playing, he lose. And all some of the journalists say this is the machine that beat his inventor. The press, the presence on the US media was really enthusiastic. These are some of the articles that in October, in November of the 1965, go to the news, to the press in US. They start a computer sits on the desk, the computer on the desktop. These are some of the things that create a big expectation on this machine. So, Olivetti, although it had to focus on the Logos 27, has been forced, particularly forced by the commercial division of Olivetti in USA, that was, by the way, merged with Underwood, to put in production. Because the Programma 101 was presented to the fair as a product, as a concept machine, but was not decided to put in production. It was just there to show, not to sell. Though they ever started to set a plant, to create all the machine, to make it that in production. And then the production that was started to be sold in the US in the 1966 at the price of $3,200, which means more or less 2 million lire at the time, on the market. Take into consideration that at that time, the marketing within Olivetti, they don't believe that the Programma 101 will have a success. Because of two reasons. It was too expensive respect a mechanical calculator, taking into consideration that the Visuma 24 was about a cost around 340,000 lire, so it means more or less 1/6 of the price of the Olivetti 101. And on the other side, it was not powerful enough respect to the big mainframe. So, where do you sell the Programma 101? Not power enough, too expensive. There is no market, no success. That was the reasoning at that time of the marketing. That was the reason because they didn't believe. The result was totally different. Starting from this 1966 up to the 72, this 6 year, Olivetti sold 44,000 Olivetti Programma 101. 40,000 in the US and 4,000 in the other. The US was the market that had absorbed, that have requested, that have bought this machine more than anything else. The machine started, you see here some of the advertising campaign, was also presented in other countries, like in Japan, like in Spain. Here you can see here where is also set the price, describing the beautiful functionalities that nobody believes that it was able to perform this kind of machine. In particular, you see here this famous, this was a movie in which you see ladies coming out of the swimming pool and sitting close to the swimming pool starting to work the programming. We like to say how easy it was. But this is a machine that my father has made it, having in mind his experience as a researcher. My father took two master degrees, one in electrotechnical and in engineer, and 1 year after in the aeronautical engineer. In that period of time between the two laurels, he works as a researcher at the university. In particular, working into the definition of the evolution of the trying to model the behavior of the air around the wings. And in order to do that, they have to make a lot of basic calculations with mechanics calculator, where these require a lot of effort because of repeating, and also you can make a lot of errors. So at the end, you are not sure about the result. And that was very stressing for researchers because of these repeating activities. So it's why I can't try to make a machine that make all this calculating automatically without, and we reducing the possibility of error and reducing the effort. That was the beginning, the idea that was behind the one. In fact, one of the things that make the Programma 101 available on the market was the fact that the Olivetti also built a libraries of programs in all these fields: the mathematics, the statistics, civil engineer, chemical engineer, electronic, finance. For example, the program that allows you to calculate when you ask for financing, to calculate with applying the French algorithm, which is the rate to return the financing, including the interest. And many other things, each one in a program. You take the program, you buy, you take the magnetic card, insert, and then it's ready. In fact, by the way, one of the applications that happened of the Olivetti 101 was in the NASA. You see here in picture, there is also a document. We say that within NASA, many documents on which the design, that document has been created using Programma 101 as the calculator to design that particular feature, that particular component of the document. But not only in the NASA, many other engineers, design firm, architectural firm. I remember something that happened that when my father goes to New York to the Sparkman and Stephens. Sparkman and Stephens was a very famous naval architect engineer. In that period was the naval engineer that has designed for 40 years the sailboat of the American Cup, and they all win except one. Okay, and when he went there for personal reason, and when we went there, he found a Programma 101. And the personal reason because one of the hobby of my father was the sailing, and there was to see to get the project, to get a new sailboat, a small sailboat. And then they found the Programma 1 even there. In the 1968, the HP come out with a machine called the HP 9010 that was inspired by the Programma 101. And it became a big, much more expensive than the Programma 101, but it was really competitive. So the Programma 101 was starting to lose his leadership, market leadership. But so when the Olivetti come to the HP saying, sorry, but there is some patent in the Olivetti 101. HP said, it's right. We done on purpose. We were inspired. We look at your patent and we build according to the architecture protect our patent. So let's find an agreement. HP, which is a very ethical company, find an agreement to pay royalties to Olivetti for each product sold of the HP 9000. And these come to $900 along the life, which is a huge amount of money, without doing nothing. But he recognized a leadership also in this part. This is the story of the Olivetti 101 as a product, but I think we have also to look at this experience also from another point. First of all, I wanted to point out what is the difference in when the Programma 101 up on the market. Let's say 1965. The first microprocessor was available by Federico Faggin with Intel in the 1971. And the one which has been used by the Altair, the Apple I, comes even later. So at the moment when Programma 101 come on the market, no components are available that were available in the 70s. This is something we have to think, to make our thinking, how innovative, how revolutionary was that machine. That come out anyway from a company that not only have a certain capability, but have a culture that is created during this year, I would say, by Adriano Olivetti. Adriano Olivetti was a big entrepreneur, not only a visionary. In the 50s, with Natale Cappellaro, supporting Natale, the genius of Natale Cappellaro, created the Divisuma 24, which was really a big product, incredible product. With the Divisuma 24, Olivetti reached the 30% of the market share in mechanical calculator. In the 1966 or something, 65, they reached 1 million products sold. It was an incredible number. But Cappellaro became the head of all the mechanic product, the ufficio progetti was managing, designing mechanic product, including also the typewriter, that is the traditional business. And Adriano in the 1955 create the division, the electronic division, under the suggestion of Enrico Fermi, that has participated to the Manhattan Project in the US, and suggested to Adriano to invest in the electronics. This is what they started, the idea, and that being created in 1959, the Elea 9003, that is mentioned by Bernardino. That was one of the very first mainframe, and don't make a confusion between calculator and a computer. This is the large computer, because that was very big. It was big, and at the time one of the most powerful, the most fast computing in terms of computing power. Unfortunately, the two leaders of this, they died in the 1960, Adriano, in the 1961, Mario Ciu. And then what's happened? Happened that all this experience moved from Olivetti to General Electric. Fortunately, all, but not the big, but not all. My father with teams remain, also because of what they are working on. Olivetti said that this is not a computer, this is a calculator. So let's keep it in Olivetti. What's happened after? When a new competitor come out, and when the mechanic start to be at the end of his age, and also the Logos 27, that was an evolution of the Disuma 24, but was not, that they didn't produce the same margin because it was more or less 6-4 times faster, but at that speed, the machine became very unstable, required a lot of maintenance, and the market started not to request. So they need to move. They decided to move away from the mechanic, to keep some product mechanic, but to create a new line of product. And this was the time that my father was appointed at the age of 36 or 37 to become the general director of all the research and development, including the mechanic of Capellaro. And considering that they had to develop a new machine, new product after Olivetti 101, they started to hire people, experienced people from the General Electric that has moved away, what was the old colleagues. And this was a group that the research and development was a group start in the 1967 and up to the 1970s. It was over 10 years. And the teams was reached 2,500 engineers, became one of the largest research and development center for the electronic, which has created a new family of products. They forget the idea to focus on the mainframe. They start to focus on a new department of products. Products that stay on the periphery. They can provide intelligence to the branch of the public authorities, of the post, of the bank, of the insurance, to all the places where you have to give services. And this product, they are products that are not used for the army or for the military. They are used to provide services to people. And this make a new era in that period. The TC800 was a smart, very sophisticated terminal that allows to perform many of the operations that in the branch when the line with the calculator is down, because they have the possibility to buffer the data, to have some part of the program resident on the machine, keeping and to be synchronized with the calculator, with the mainframe when the line come up. So trying to extend the capability of services. The P6060 is it is another desktop computer, which is the evolution of the Programma 101, set up with the component that at that time were available, the microprocessor. And at that time, the designing of all the new machine has been set following certain characteristics, certain strategy. They decided to follow, for example, one brand in order to have and to keep all the capabilities according to the design capability related to the brand. This brand was Intel. They opened in the 1971 an office in Cupertino, so that this office was able to collect all the specification of the new semiconductor product that was coming out, because the new machine has to be designed not on the component that are available today, but on the component that will be available after 6 months. So that specification that to be required, to be retrieved before, and all the design of the new product have to be on that specification. In the 1976, also they produced the T101, the 101, Programma 101, T101. And what is this product? It was the first electronic typewriter. It was a symbolic product because Olivetti started with the mechanic typewriter, and the T101 was the one that do the typewriting but using the electronic. And was a very successful product in the day after, because was actually the first word processor, because it allows you to store to retrieve and store all the letter that you want to type, correct, and print. And then if it doesn't go well, to print again with making some changes. They have the possibility to change the font, because they have what they call the Margherita. They have different font available, so you can also change the font, like you can do also today on the PC, on the Word. But so this new era of Olivetti is something which is not very well known, because many people say that Olivetti 101 was an excellent product, coming from a genius of a small team, Italian team. That was not understood by the company. Partially true, but was also a moment that allows Olivetti to keep and continue to work on the electronic, to keep and work to create innovation, to create a product under the philosophy, and the philosophy that has been created and by Adriano Olivetti, even if Olivetti died in the 1960s. There is one thing that I have to say. In 1978, there was another change in the organization. Carlo De Benedetti came and take the ownership of Olivetti. And in that part, immediately after of the exit on the market of the IBM personal computer, which actually created the name and a new follow, Carlo De Benedetti gave to the office in Cupertino that's been created by my father in 1971, but the commitment to build a new product that was called the M20. This product was designed independently on what was the experience in Ivrea. Olivetti, Carlo Benedetti probably thought that is in Silicon Valley, in the most advanced place, so let's forget the experience we have in Ivrea, build that new product, the M20. Unfortunately, the M20 was not the result of a vision, it was a result of the trying to follow simply the technological evolution of their components. So that they, for example, they didn't choose the Intel, while the PCBM is based on the Intel. And they decided not to choose the MS-DOS, but decided to create his own operating system that they call PICOS. This has immediately set this machine working only on the programs created specific for that component, without having the possibility to use any other available product. They understood the mistake immediately, and the day after, giving the responsibility to Luigi Mercurio, that became the new responsible of the research and development, created the M24. The M24 was the IBM compatible, that the personal computer IBM compatible, most sold in the world even today. It becomes a fantastic machine in terms of speed, in terms of price, has been chosen by AT&T. Olivetti made an agreement with AT&T, so he manufactured the M24, and the AT&T in US resell under the brand AT&T that machine. And then that machine was even today in the history the machine that has been the machine that has sold in terms of between the compatible more than any other machine in the world. I think I finished my talk trying to tell you a story, and also to create also a scenario on what happened between the age of Adriano and something which is not today, but was the something happened after the Programma101. Thank you.
So I think we're ready. Yeah, wow. Rather, they all go with P something.
Yeah, sorry.
So time for questions. Nicole.
More than a question, I have a comment that I think is also for all the audience. When this was advertised, I received an email from people that some of us know very well, and one of them was Raffaele Resta from Trieste that says, oh yeah, I remember very well the Programma 101, and actually Franco Bassani, that's one of the fathers of condensed matter physics, bought one in Scuola Normale in 1967. And what I thought was the very sweet sort of comment is that he gave that to manage to a laureando, someone preparing his laurea thesis, and the borsista was Elio Tosatti, the senior person, and the laureando was Alfonso Baldereschi. So the two people there were in charge of the Programma 101, and these are two of the founders for us of computational condensed matter physics. So I thought this was very sweet, and Raffaele, that couldn't actually attend this in remote, mentioned it, so I thought I could share this. But this opens also the curiosity, do you actually have a working Programma 101? Yes. Because I found emulators on the net, but...
There is in Ivrea, together with the Natale Capellaro Foundation and the Museum of Tecnologicamente, that work together with Gastone Garziera, which was one of the people that worked on the Programma 101. They make many of old machine working. Actually, I have two Programma 101. This is part of my third life in my relationship with Olivetti, that were able to make it work. Obviously, it's a machine which is incredible. When you connect it to the power and switch it on, the impression, because there is the noise, because there is an electric machine with starting turns, starting with the also a propeller inside for the reducing the warm, and also you can also smell the smell of the gears, and also the smell of the ink of the printer. So it's something much more different than the experience we have, like for example your MacBook is totally silent and it doesn't smell anything.
Actually,
and also, I made the experience to also to play the Angela game against the real 1-1, and it is really an experience. In particular, when you try to not respect the rule, because you have to choose. Remember the constraint, and if you decide not to choose one of the allowed numbers, you click it, and the Programma 101 link in the red. And then it doesn't accept and start working, waiting for the run. So it didn't crash.
Thanks. For those here at the PFL, actually, that might not know, there is a very beautiful museum, the Musée Bolo, in the basement of INF 1. That collects a lot of the computers that have been used at the PFL. So I don't know if there is a Programma 101, but we should lobby to.
I looked, but they don't have one, and I think you're right. We should lobby for them to get one. I don't think so. Michele, do you know if they have one? I don't think so. No. There was a question there from John.
So actually, first a remark. I just looked up on the web to try and figure out what $3,600 would be worth now. It's a factor of 8. Some web page says that. So I mean, I guess a Programma 101 today would be about 6 months of a PhD student. So it's not so. I mean, it would be something like $50,000.
Yeah.
Right?
A little bit less, but something like that.
Yeah, sure. And so I mean, it's half a PhD student. PhD student's 50. So it was still quite expensive. I mean, it was a considerable investment.
Expensive but affordable. It's like
yeah,
BMW.
Yeah, exactly. Good value. but then my next question actually is more sociological. I mean, Olivetti, General Electric. General Electric can't have been terribly happy about the Programma 101, but it was mainframe versus desktop.
Olivetti, the General Electric, the Programma 101 was not part.
No, but I mean, there's a question when you sell the electronics part of Olivetti to General Electric.
Yeah.
I can imagine they weren't so happy. Or I mean, it's mainframe versus desktop, or what? I mean, and similarly, I mean.
This is one question. What would happen if Adriano Olivetti was still alive at the time?
No?
Probably the evolution, the future would be different because they spend the Olivetti the Programma 101 was not pushed on the market, was not marketed on the market as they should be in that particular situation with this incredible competitive advantage that they have. Because it's right, it's expensive, but you have to compare that price with the price of a much bigger computer, which costs much more. If instead of Adriano Olivetti was live at that time, probably he would have done the same things that he done in the 50s. He would probably understood the product, push the product, create and diffuse a program to manufacture the product in a different plant all over the world, and also try to push commercially, as if done with the Visuma 24 and with all other products. Because in the 50s, as we said, Olivetti was rich. And it was rich for three reasons. The first one, to come out from the Second World War without being touched by the war. No, the line, the production line was not bombed. Fortunately, Ivrea was not in some crucial place that either by the Allies or by the Germans to be bombed. Second, part of the same issue, before Germans arrives in Ivrea, all the employees, they have a strong attachment, strong commitment toward the company. They hide all the products that were in the warehouse. So when the German arrives, they didn't find anything. All the products disappeared. So then when the war finished, all the employees returned back all the product. The line was not damaged, so the Olivetti can start fast to support a demand that immediately after was very high. And this is one, more than any other company. We have a company like Piaggio, the one that made the Vespa, you know, the very famous, it was totally destroyed by the war because they were started manufacturing weapon, bullet there, so they were one of the targets of the bomb. Second, incredible high margin product that they make. First of all, the Visuma 24. Let's imagine that I sell a car because the price, also the Visuma 24 was expensive. Actually, it was less expensive than the competitor. The competitor was expensive, cost like a Fiat 500 at the time, which would be a little bit less than the Fiat 500 today. That is a little bit fancy, so it could be positioned to be different. And then the company gain the 19% of what you pay. It's margin, right? It's incredible. Third, it created this network, this commercial net, expand all the branches, expand all internationally, in particular the so-called concessionario Olivetti, which in an early franchising, where the private the concessionario belongs to private people, local entrepreneur, supported with the brand, with the training by the company in Ivrea to create not only the marketing, but also what element of training that is required to properly use the component for the office automation. Probably the same things Adriano will make it. But even if he was not there anymore, when my father, almost alone with two collaborators, in fact, entered in the organization of Capellaro with plenty of mechanics, persons which are not electronics, but having the support of Natale Capellaro, which is one of the persons most supported by Adriano, without having any organizational indication how to relationship with all the members of the future project, all this team automatically started to collaborate. Automatically. There is a lot of mechanical part inside the Olivetti 101. Like, for example, the keyboard. The keyboard is mechanical. If you push two buttons together, it stops, it doesn't allow to. But this is done mechanically, not electronically. There is an engine that moves the different part, like the card reader, like the printer, like the folding. There is only one engine, electronic engine that control all these things and this is mechanical.
So again, this is an example of how the culture of the enterprise goes into the building of the product. Sorry, I don't want to interrupt you, but maybe we can keep talking about this later. I just wanted to, there is a question that comes from
again, there's a question from an online participant. It's again Giovanni Cicotti. He's saying, you seem to suggest that the Olivetti plan was not easily sustainable without the continuous presence of an exceptional individual. And then the question is, in fact, the question is, why Italy, with such a start, disappeared completely from the computing market? That's a larger question.
Taking into consideration that between the Olivetti 101 and today, it passed 60 years, almost 60 years, and a lot of things have been changed. My speech arrives to the 83 when mentioned the M24. Let's consider that the M24 was the first PC compatible, but after the M24, 10 years after, the next 10 years, everything has been built using in the core a PC, including the bancomat, the ATM. If you go to the teller machine at that age, inside they changed the architecture to not to have dedicated hardware, but to have a PC compatible. The branch, like for example of the bank, in the 80s and also has been creating in the branch not terminals, but PC connected in local area network with another PC that was like a server that is connected to the mainframe. And this PC looked at the server with no keyboard and no screen is able to be controlled by another machine, another keyboard using functionality like the remote control, like the virtual console, something that today we usually use. So in the 80s, also all the PC, and in that period, Olivetti was one of the leaders in the PC industry. Then in the 90s, also the Olivetti was starting not only in the hardware but only on the software. So the area of business that Olivetti was present was facing immediate direction. They create a network for supporting the maintenance of all this hardware, create a software to support the office automation, create the new machines. So it started evolving. In the 90s, they focus on the telco. Most of the investment that have to be done if you want to stay in a market that became more and more a commodity, because the PC is becoming a commodity, because to stay there, like what's happening today in the car market, no? To stay on the market, you have to be big, so that you create the economic of scale to be competitor against the other. So the PC is becoming a commodity, requires to be bigger. So the evolution is that only few players can today stay on the market, and the others have to exit. So this, I didn't answer to the question, but I just wanted to say what was the evolution. The Programma 101 in 1965 was not a commodity.
Okay, do we have more questions? Okay.
Perhaps following up a little bit in the same way as the question from Giovanni. I think that, seeing this story of Olivetti and the personal story of Adriano, I think that the parallel with Steve Jobs with Apple is one that is quite natural to think of, and it's kind of interesting to see how somehow Apple managed to survive very well to Steve Jobs dying, and this. I mean, I think it's fair to say that even though Olivetti survived for a long time after Adriano, he didn't keep on the same path, right? So,
can I suggest something? Because I love this as a cliffhanger question,
okay.
And I think it can help us transition towards the last part, which is more on a conversation, and I think it would be nice also to involve maybe Beniamino in the answer to this part. So I would suggest, let's thank Paolo again. 3 or 4 minutes for us to move and go and sit there, and we restart in 5 minutes with the last half an hour of informal conversation. Is that okay for everybody? Good, thank you. So we're almost ready to restart with this second part, which is very, very informal. You can tell that because we're sitting on high chairs and next to tables. You can also tell that because you will see that people move, and we are waiting for coffee for our speakers that will be delivered by 2 Olivetti boys of excellence, because Nicola Marzari and Michele Ceriotti are gone on a mission to find coffee for us. So this is super cool. So maybe I would wait for a second for Michele to come back, since he asked the cliffhanger question. Let me just remind people in the room that you are more than welcome to ask questions at any time or interrupt if you have a comment that you feel you really need to make. Wonderful. Here are the Olivetti boys bringing coffee.
I don't know exactly for whom we have.
So, thank you very much.
If you want one or...
Thank you. Thanks very much. Sorry about this. This is part of the informal nature of the very inside conversations. So now that Michele is back in the room.
We're going to share it.
So I was telling people in the room that you are more than welcome to ask questions and interrupt whenever you want. The similar comment for people participating online is that you are also more than welcome to keep asking questions. Also, someone whose name is not Giovanni Cicotti could dare to do that. And in order to do it, what you need to do is simply type your question on the Q&A chat window, and Nicola and Ignacio will make sure that we know about them and we can relay them. So we parted a few minutes ago on a cliffhanger question asked by Michele, which was, so how come that Apple, that I have to say, I agree, has a lot of resonances, both in terms of innovation, creativity, marketing, the importance of design that goes together with technology, the strategy for selling. It resonates a lot with the stories that we've heard today about Olivetti. So how come they survived Steve Jobs' death and the Olivetti enterprises were not as successful?
Attempt to give like partial answer. In the first place, I'm not that convinced that like such similarities between Steve Jobs and Adriano Olivetti, such similarities go anywhere like beyond like the genius, no? In terms of taste, in terms of capability to innovate. Because what like is missing on the Apple side compared to Olivetti, but of course like my vision is perhaps like the vision of a partisan, no? Or is that Olivetti has had Adriano Olivetti had a strong commitment with the social impact of like his industry, his way of being an entrepreneur, and as a matter of fact, as I said in my talk, there was also like a political view, a political project behind like the Olivetti, Adriano Olivetti action, Adriano Olivetti's action, behind Adriano Olivetti action as an entrepreneur as well. And Adriano Olivetti was focused on the community, no? As a whole of like human beings working together in order to create, like, and he wrote like these things. It's not just an interpretation that we are giving like after, in order to really create a new society in which the industry, in which the production of means of production of goods, of technology, was going like to fit into like a precise and precisely designed society he had in mind. I think that this is like lacking in Steve Jobs' like view on innovation, which is rather like more focused on design for designing. It's like without many values, no, like behind, and it's much more focused, of course, like just innovating without like placing such innovation into a more complex and ambitious scenario. That's my opinion.
Can I follow up? I think I see what you mean here, but I'm sort of wondering if actually the necessity of having this vision as part of a more complicated utopic redesign of society is also, from an industrial standpoint, a weakness. Because if you have a vision that is purely industrial and takes the social boundary conditions as a given, then the industry can succeed even if society just keeps on its course. If you have a vision of industry that also envisions a transformation of society, if society doesn't transform, you also...
Your game is over. Yeah, I don't know. I would just like to add like a few words and then I would myself. Also concerning like the other question that was made before the break. I think that a little bit of historic context that's really important here in order to look at the Olivetti history. So I agree with you, but we have to take into consideration that at the end of the 50s, so basically when, to sum it up, Adriano Olivetti crossed the ocean and bought like the most important like American industry in mechanics and office furniture. The time when he was investing millions of euro, like at the time, but like a huge investment in electronics. He was proposing a new way of like a new movement to the European like politic within the European politics scenario. Like these three factors like really play against him in a way that is not comparable for like the society at the time was really going towards something else. And why it ended up, not that there was a question from the QA section where was asked why given like such excellent the Italian market, like the Italian companies are no longer competitive. Well, in between that line of history that Paolo has provided like quite clearly to us, in between like the end of the 50s and the mid 60s, there were made like precise political action in order to shut the electronic division down and sell it to the General Electric. So because Europe was going through a definition of geopolitical, choices that were made, politics by the interaction between the Americans and the European government, and definitely that field wasn't supposed to be developed by one of the countries that also had started the war, the Second World War, and definitely not by a company at the top of which there was a man sitting who was like thinking of a society that could have been very attractive for the model for like countries such as like the moderate part of the US the Russian bloc. So like giving the context, I think it's very important. We cannot compare like the scenario Olivetti was like operating in with the context which Steve Jobs, for instance, operated, and last also like the strategic importance that the political environment recognized to the Olivetti effort and to, I guess, like job effort. So Olivetti couldn't like get any support from, even after like 1963, 1965, Olivetti couldn't get any support from the government in order to keep keeping the electronic division. The CEO of the Fiat at the time, who was, like as Paolo has explained us, who entered like the society, like the new board of administrations of Olivetti, literally said at the first board of directors meeting, said in order to survive, Olivetti has a flaw, as a spot that has to be eradicated, which is the electronic division. And that was a deal in which, of course, like the government played a role in order to design the strategy of the development of the country. And electronic was not like part of this deal, was not part of this vision. And nevertheless, Roberto Olivetti, Adriano's first son, managed to help Paolo's father in order to open the laboratory from which the P101 came out later. And he tried to set up, to gather a few European industry, Siemens for instance, in order to create a European electronic industry at the end of the 60s, beginning of the 70s. And he couldn't do that. I think that like context give us the extent today in order to put things in the right perspective compared with the world we have been living in the past 10, 20 years.
I think it's
easier.
I think it's very interesting to hear this historical perspective, at a time where Europe is going through this initiative to support the semiconductor industry, to build a semiconductor industry in the continent. It's kind of interesting to.
I'd like to add one thing to what you said, just to reinforce what Benjamin said. We have to consider that the electronic computer by the Americans are considered a strategic weapon. They won, actually, the Second World War because of the computer. The machine Turing was able to decrypt Enigma. The computers was in the core in the Manhattan Project, and Fermi was the demonstration, to be able to make the US able to make the atomic bomb before the Germans. When we lost as Italy the Second World War, we had to pay we had some constraint. For example, we couldn't develop the portaerei, the carriers. For example, for many years we couldn't have the color TV. These were some limitation introduced by the fact that we are a loser. In that time, nobody put a condition that the Italian could develop electronically framed electronics. When the Eleanor 9003 came up on the market as one of the fastest computers, let's understand what means fastest. Fastest, which means was able to decrypt something or to create a new weapon before the enemies. And this happened in Italy, which is on the border between the two blocks, by an entrepreneur. It was not clear from which part he stayed. Someone said in Italian, Adriano Olivetti, like the red entrepreneur, because his efforts spent for the social welfare of the people. So when Adriano died, Mario Ciu died, a beautiful occasion happened, so that the Olivetti entered in crisis. A new board entered, by the way, managed by the company, the Italian company, which is closer to the US, which is Fiat. Fiat was well known, one of the company that has a strong relation with the US, consider also the type of market, the type of industry in which it is, the automotive. So that they managed the way with some reasons, because it is true that the electronic require a lot of investment to move all this stuff, all the electronic, to an American company. The number one, the largest American company, which is the General Electric. But by the way, 6 years later, decided to quit from the computer science, because I didn't say it. In the 70s, Olivetti, General Electric, exit from the computer. So they didn't have a long vision plan. Even if they also bought other computers, also the Bull bought. So all the experience in the electronic that was created in Europe has been bought by an American company. There is some reason behind.
I also, John, yes.
I was going to ask a question. Is this issue between private companies and publicly held companies? And for example, I guess Steve Jobs, he reports to his shareholders, or he did, and he couldn't do social engineering. I mean, I think it would be illegal, strictly speaking, right? What was the situation with Olivetti when he was working on the really trying? Was Olivetti a private company?
One of the ideas but I think that Beniamino can explain better, that was the considering among the stakeholders of the company, the people that work in the company itself. This is one was what the plan to how to shape the ownership of the company.
But there were publicly traded stocks as well
Yeah,
at
but-
that time, yeah, already.
Well, like first place, Olivetti was a family company, no?
Yeah.
Until like certain period, the end of the 30s. And one problem was that the family were like 6 monk brothers and sisters. They were not like very, very united. And they didn't manage to develop like a tool in order to not being overrun by like other shareholders. But until Adriano Olivetti was alive, he managed to, in the first place, like keep his family quiet because he was like able to make them to produce a lot of profits for them. So it's weird because like here like there is a saying in Italy it says like that if you talk about the rope in the house of the hanging man, like so I don't want to talk about the marriage and this stuff, but if you put like in trying to like in the attempt to trace where Adriano Olivetti, where is the fall in the Olivetti's, way of on being an entrepreneur, whether it was sustainable or not sustainable, a lot of questions. If you put out of the operation the human factor of Adriano Olivetti, who was like, let's say, a genius, was a man who could and who was able to like launch the and to invest in electronics against all the things that we've been saying, was able to make a lot to produce a lot of profits for the stakeholders who were looking at him like suspiciously because of the amount of like money that the company spent for the social project and stuff. And eventually he was about to transform and change the ownership model for Olivetti as a company into it was about to turn into a foundation. It was called Fondazione Proprietaria. When he died here in Switzerland, like a note was found in his code, in which was stated like I'm not sure whether like all the family members are going to give up their 5%, I guess was of the ownership, but like he had in mind this new model of ownership for the company, a foundation in which the 25% of the property, the ownership, was to be owned by the worker unions. Another 25% was owned by the closest cultural institution to the company. In the case of Olivetti, was the Politecnico di Torino, which means the competence, like the technical skills, the technical component. Another 25% of the company was going to be owned by the community, which means like the political coordination subject. And another 25% was to be owned by the traditional and old shareholders in order to, so it was like strategically, the Olivetti was like really smart. And afterwards, when he died, I mean, if we take him out of the operation, if you take out of this like really complicated operation where geopolitics is involved, where some major and key crux of like the 20th century history is involved. If you take him out of the operation, all this like sophisticated, complicated building collapsed.
Sure.
And Olivetti was overrun by like other people. It was overruled by the lack of a vision as a country
Yeah, sure. So I guess he was this very, very strong central figure, backed up with a 90% profit margin, which probably gave him a little bit of room for maneuver. And he was holding together this amazing vision. Yeah.
I would like also to add another comment. However, even today, company that do not have an ethical background, they are not sustainable. They envision a sustainable business. They today are not sustained by the shareholder. Shareholder today are trying to so if you go to the stock exchange, now there is a big movement to give a premium to those companies that are working in a sustainable way. Today there is a lot of companies that they do in order to sustain their stock exchange value to do what they call the greenwashing, no? Because these are representing an addition of cost in a certain way, okay? But at the moment, this value needs depend also on the culture of the shareholder. The shareholder can decide to invest to one company, ethical, or to a company which is not ethical, that just does give you profit. And today, is the common view is that companies that do not have an ethical attitude, they are in a business that maybe could not last for a long time.
I think it's the shifting between know how to know why, which was like articulated.
Just to put additional elements on this discussion we are having again from an online participant, Giovanni Cicotti. So there are two comments about more the personal and more the politics. I put everything together so we open the discussion. So on one hand, he says, seems to me that the major difference between jobs, he's going to and Olivetti management, is that neither Chu nor Perotto were managing the enterprise, and once the smart Olivetti was substituted by standard managers, the fate of Olivetti was drowned. What do you think about this personal view? And the other, which is related to Fiat, also you seem to suggest more a conspiration against than a natural development. Fiat, in particular, was not a fair industry. They relied on the state to produce bad products and survive all the same. That the corruption of Italian politics. It's about the nature of the company. So I don't know if you want to comment on these two aspects.
Frankly speaking, I do not understand well the questions.
Maybe so. There is one is more about this comparison with jobs and the role of the personal role of Olivetti, that his vision. Then when Olivetti died, the fact that he was replaced by standard managers, and then the fact that Perotto and Cho didn't have a saying in the management, whether that lack of vision of the management that really set the fate of the company, to which extent that really finally the reason for
there are many things that can put Steve Jobs and Adriano Olivetti that they can share. There are certain similarities, but also some differences. One of the differences is what Beniamino just said. The thinking of Adriano was go farther than. But anyway, some similarities is that both they have put strong attention to the person. No, they have, Steve Jobs introduced what has been considered the user-centered design, no, which is something that Olivetti has applied since the very beginning when they design a product, putting the person in the center of the design process. Another consideration that make me is that Olivetti, that Steve Jobs has made a big success, but also made some failure before reaching the success. And sometimes the failure is something which enables the further success. he founded Apple, and then he was forced to quit.
Sure.
Because he has, from a certain point, exaggerated with the Macintosh, with a more user-centered approach, he delayed 6 months the exit on the market of the Macintosh because he wanted to get out the foiling because it was making noise. And this was a big damage in terms of economics. This is one of the reasons because they forced it to go away, because it cannot stay. It cannot, because of that caused a lot of loss to the company. So he goes away. When he goes away, by the way, he has invested in a small company that do computer vision, so that for many years they have make a lot of loss, years to years. A certain point, someone that was suggesting to Steve Jobs to sell this plant of losses. He didn't want to do, but not because he has a vision. This company is called Pixar, and in that year, with Toy Story, became one of the richest companies, and they was lucky because
Can I interrupt you, because I worry that we are now locked in a comparison that is perhaps not. I mean, I think we've squeezed it as much as we can, and I was wondering if we can go beyond. There is a question on the back, and then I'll come back.
Maybe to trying to get away from this Jobs Olivetti comparison, and what a product that hasn't really been talked about, and related products are the Spectrums, the ZX, the 2048. Which appeared early 80s, and many of us, at least I learned how to program with the Spectrum. And I'm wondering, did that play any role in this evolution of Olivetti, or was it a small niche market for the youth at the time, perhaps too focused on computer games and less on programming? Like, what was the role of the very innovative form factor, which was a little keyboard connected to a TV that was in everyone's homes?
The Olivetti was mainly focused on the office automation. In particular, became a leader in the branch automation. That was the market on which he has. And working there means not only selling the hardware component, but also some software solution that allows to implement all the function for the office automation, the branch automation that is becoming more and more sophisticated. One of the areas where Olivetti traditionally gained a lot of money was the specialized printer. Specialized printer, I mean those printers that are used in the bank. Even today, many of these printers are still Olivetti, and are the printers that are able to manage, for example, it's not anymore a lot of use, but for example, to read a check, to print just one page of document that has to be put to the teller, that can, for example, not only print but also manage many of these things. Okay. Today it's difficult to talk about branch automation when most of banks are closing branch and go to the self-service, but this is also another story. So for this reason, they didn't go too much in the gaming and the Spectrum. So that was not his natural market. And do not also have a sales structure to follow that market.
Do you think even if the Olivetti didn't go in that direction, did the evolution of that product or that class of products, did they have an impact, or was it too peripheral?
Do you mean the Spectrum?
Yeah.
First of all, that area, for example, the Spectrum, if I remember, was based on the Zilog microprocessor. And the Olivetti, even after they followed the traditional Intel, the Intel platform, like I've done, by the way, Apple from several times until today. So technically it was two different technical solutions. And also depends a lot on the objective. Olivetti's work on building a system, cioè a set of machines connected together that have to work with the mainframe, that are more complex solutions on which they can have more margin. Then try to build a specific product for the consumer market. He did a few tentative, I remember some console that was allowing to manage the multimedia, but what was an exception and was not so much successful, frankly speaking.
We have a question from Ivan.
So one element that I found fascinating, sort of rereading in these days about Olivetti, and maybe we haven't touched about, is actually the fact that he created in 1957 the SGS, Società Generale Semiconductor, understanding that you actually needed that ecosystem of hardware that, you know, at the end it's probably been, the winning card of Silicon Valley. That is, it was not only, the industry, but it was, Fairchild Semiconductor and then Intel. And so this, I think, is also an element that...
it is. By the way, the STM electronics is today, it is still live today, is the evolution of the company.
But do you feel that the development of the electronic division was constrained by the availability of hardware components? Or is it really...
No, but they understood that the capability, not the hardware component, particularly at the time the board, that was the main, and then in the future also the semiconductor product, that was one of the key elements. But when we talk about the semiconductor, we are already in the 70s, not in the 60s, not in the 50s, not in the end of the 50s. Olivetti, when I was entering and starting a new line of product, has always created companies to support the evolution and the manufacture of the product, not only in the semiconductor, but also in other areas. For example, they have a company for the sinterization, specialized on that part which is very important, and they created a dedicated society, the company, for supporting that line of product that can be sold to Olivetti, maybe also to other on the market. So it's not strange that was happened in the vision of the start in that period under there was a decision taken by Adriano. But afterward, also the manager made this type of to create the company for making ATMs, bancomat, for example. That was another area of application in line with the type of client that is the target. The client number one of Olivetti in the 80s were the bank, the branch of the banks. And I remember. By the way, that was a story that I liked personally. In the 92-3, they make a very big event in Lisbona, talking about the virtual bank and where he showed all the huge portfolio of products that Olivetti was able to offer to the banks at the time, ranging from the ATM to the internet banking to the branch automation to all the securities that are required, all the platform to support the security, the payment system, the POS, the specialized printer. It was a really huge offering that was competing. One of the client at the time of Olivetti that was presenting there was a Citibank, by the way. So they have at that time very important client.
But the idea is always to create the ecosystem for any product and the production line with all the materials. We have, Michele, maybe are there more questions from the online participants? or why? So maybe one last question from Ken, and then I would like to close, going back a little bit to the people. And
I think I want to ask this because it's completely shifting gears and it's very on the technical side of the Programma 101. I was very fascinated by your description of this memory.
Yeah.
I mean, it's insane, that the idea of having memory stored in sort of an elastic wave, it's incredible. But the question that I have is that now, right now, in this moment of time, the basic technology that underlies all of the electronic industry is very consolidated. It's a very clear platform, silicon-based, but there is a lot of speaking about neuromorphic computing, about computing based on photons. And do you think that there is? I don't know. I'm trying kind of thinking of how this completely different physical mechanism that was underlying this memory, how it affected the evolution of Programma 101. Perhaps it was just a quirk that they could change with something else later on. Do you think that the platform...
The 101, I was saying, was the result of a vision, not from the availability of the technology. Because the technology was not available. There's partly invented, partly retrieved from the very past, because the data comes from the 40s, not the very fast. Something evolving the existing technology, that was the micromodules, that was putting together in an intelligent way to save space and to make. So, but all this choice was done because it was they have a clear vision. Clear wanted to have a computer, that was a computer programmer, fully under control of a single person that is required for that who is designing a new machine, a boat for the American Cup, or for making some research in certain particular field, as happened to do to my father before joining Olivetti. So this is the reason because we put together these technologies. 10 years later, the technology could be the same, but the objective the technology can be completely different, but the vision could be the same.
Okay, so basically, what you're saying is that it was not really driven by, okay, this is the available technology.
Exactly.
That's a more. We look
an
for
example, an example of what happened for when they decided to follow the technology without a vision is the example of the M20. When arrived Benedetti, which was not a person, it's a financial guy, but he's not a person that knows the market and not a visionary person in this field. He saw, as a financial, that the Silicon Valley is the place where most of the innovation take place. Take the person that was there, he said, created a new product. And this guy created a new product using the best technologies available at the moment, without considering something, and he created the M20. By the way, using the Zilog Z8000, that was at the moment the most performing microprocessor. But that was totally incompatible with all the set of programs that were available on MS-DOS, which, by the way, at the time was not the number one of the operating system, but it was the most diffused. And IBM was very smart to use that instead of creating another one. He did it 10 years later with OS2, but trying to keep it. So, and that was honestly one of the more expensive flop of Olivetti that was immediately corrected and with the M24. That decided the number 4, it's a completely different machine.
So I think, unfortunately, we are a few more minutes, not many. So if there are no other curiosities from you guys, we've heard names today of people, and I just wanted to close with a couple of stories about those. And there are two characters that I very much like, and that are the character of Natale Cappellaro, that has been mentioned before. And I would like to ask Beniamino maybe to tell us a little bit about his history, his parabola within Olivetti, because I think it's the kind of story about, how people were grown and cultivated in the enterprise that explains also why someone like Mario Chu, who is my second character that I would like to mention today, decided to go and work at Olivetti. He was in New York, in Columbia, so that was a time when people left Columbia University to go and work in Pisa, a remarkable thing for us Italians today. Who was also quite a special character, and as it was remembered before, there is also this weird coincidence that he died on the 9th of November of 1961, so today. We didn't know this. I didn't know that Elea had been inaugurated in November 8th, 1959, or that Chu had died on November 9th when we fixed the date for this meeting, so this is a nice geometry of chance. Beniamino, can you tell us a bit about Natale?
Yeah, as Paolo said, Natale Cappellaro was like at the end of his career was the chief of research and development at Olivetti. But he started as a young mechanic when he was 13 years old, coming from a really poor family of the surroundings of Ivrea. Ivrea was a tiny village devoted, like as most of Italy at the time, devoted to agriculture rather than industry. And Natale Cappellaro grew first he attended was called CFM, the Centro Formazione Meccanici. I would like
a training school for mechanics.
Yeah, training school, Olivetti Training School for Mechanics. And then he gained competence in mechanic fields. And there's this story, I think that is what you were referring to, which is quite fascinating. That at a certain point, I think at the end of the 30s, Adriano Olivetti was informed by the human resource department at Olivetti. At the time, Olivetti had maybe 20,000 employees around the world, and was informed that in Ivrea, the chief of the human resource informed him that there was a young man, a guy who was stealing pieces from the laboratory. So Adriano Olivetti, instead of firing him, and the chief of human resources, of course, suggested to fire him. And Adriano Olivetti, instead of firing him, wanted to see further into this story. So he asked the human resource manager to look what were the reasons why this guy had the need to steal from the laboratory. So they went to Natale Cappellaro and asked him about if he had problems back home, if the wage, the salary was not enough in order to provide for his family. And he replied, no, not at all. I'm just I'm keeping the pieces home because I think that the calculating machine can be improved. So I work at night at home at the machine. And this is the beginning of the story of the Ibisuma, which was then developed by Natale Cappellaro through these 9 adjustments, let's call it like that, which provided the margin throughout the 50s for Olivetti. And I want just to conclude also to stress the idea and the knowledge that we should have when we think about the Olivetti history, that Adriano Olivetti really addressed the company, the industry with a meaning. I would say that was not just a practical meaning. As for the quote that I read at the beginning of my presentation, Adriano Olivetti really and firmly thought that industry was just a profit were just like a mechanism, like the most important mechanism in order to like give birth to another like society. And there was also like a strong, I would say, mystic, religious mystic, of course, like thinking behind this belief. And recently we found in the archives, we found an interview, like was recorded, an interview with Adriano Olivetti, and then we published it. And at a certain point, it's very like meaningful. Like at a certain point, the interviewer asked Adriano Olivetti about Natale Cappellaro, or about something like referring to the like development and research. And Adriano Olivetti said, like, you look, like we have provided like the environment because of genius of mechanic as Natale Cappellaro could operate and could develop this machine, this calculating machine, which is our like best fortune. I mean, we definitely throughout the years provided the environment, we provided the conditions, the preconditions through which this invention could be made. But then, like Adriano Olivetti like said, but the fact that Natale Cappellaro is like really like world genius of mechanics was born in Ivrea and not, I don't know, in southern Italy or in Chicago, but he was born in Ivrea. It was made possible just by providence and not by like any other factor. So that this gives the extent of how like Adriano Olivetti firmly believed that there is like another layer on which like innovation and efficiency could like really be found. And I think that, and I finish. I think what really is impressive nowadays is the combination between modernity, between efficiency, both like in innovating, in the industrial like designing and commercial, like it's the combination between this highly performative concreteness, we say like practicality, with this really the combination with this aspect and like a metaphysic way of looking at minimum productions and modernity as an opportunity and not just as a tool, like a tool of mean of profit.
Okay, so I think that this is a nice note to end on. I think that the message that I would try to take home is create the best possible conditions for genius to flourish here at SICAM and at Marvel, and then learn from the example of those who came before us. With that, I would like to thank Pierpaolo and Beniamino very, very much for gifting us with this afternoon of thinking a little bit outside the normal ranges of SICAM and Marvel and strict scientific thinking that we have here. I would like to thank you all here in the room for staying with us throughout the afternoon, and those online for also following us. Ignacio, do you want to close with some information?
Said already what we said, so I think we should
thank you very much.
I hope you have enjoyed as much as I've done of this session, learning about Olivetti and about what really they contributed in the early stages of the machines that we use normally. And for all of you, thank you for staying until the end. I remind you that, as I said at the beginning, there are these periodic type of events that we organize, SICAM and Marvel, and that if you have found this interesting, you can follow that in our through the web or enrolling in the mailing list so that you can get the information, timely information for forthcoming events as well. So thank you very much for being here.